Welcome into the Full Tilt Devy Podcast, brought to you by the Full Tilt Dynasty Podcast Network. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A. Normally, I say joined as always by Andy Starr, but as you can see, the beautiful beard is not here tonight. This is a Devy devotional takeover. If you don't know what Devy devotional is, that is a Devy show brought to you by myself, Dynasty Coach A, and my guest tonight and my co-host of the Devy devotional at Aaron Wilcox 86. Aaron Wilcox, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, it's a little bit of an atypical, I guess, host situation tonight. But hey, I'm happy to be talking football with you tonight.
Absolutely. It's a little weird. Andy had to drop out kind of last minute. I actually brought Aaron on because Andy and Aaron were going to be talking about some of the 2026 freshman class that are coming in. I have not had enough time to do my due diligence on it, so I didn't want to just talk out of my ass. And so Aaron has done quite a bit of work, which is shocking because I know he's busy with work and life and getting married and everything else, and then he still has time to look at all these recruits. And then Andy's done quite a bit of research as well. So I was looking forward to them talking about it. Unfortunately, Andy had a small scale emergency, and so he's not here with us. And Lucas got a new, our fearless producer got a new setup, and he's having some issues with the microphone and everything. So like I said, it's a Devy devotional takeover tonight. And we're gonna do our best to stay on the rails, if you will, and talk about some 2026 guys, maybe some portal news, maybe even get in the college football championship. Quite a bit to talk about here. But like I said, Aaron is from the Devy Devotional, my co-host there. Why don't you tell everyone who doesn't know who you are or anything about you a little bit about yourself, Aaron?
Oh, sure thing. So, like you said, we podcast about C2C, Devy, all sorts of prospect evaluation, and that's just one piece of, I guess, fantasy football that I really love. It's doing that. So I've been involved in Dynasty, Devy, and now C2C leagues and CFF leagues even. I just have so much fun with that side of things. So that's one of my big hobbies. And otherwise, I am from Duluth, Minnesota. So I guess the western tip of Lake Superior up in the upper Midwest, and it just got done with quite a bit of snow blowing. We got hit here, but that's not a rare thing for this area. So that's just one of the things that I was doing today. But I'm also a physical therapist, so I work at an outpatient clinic and treat all variety of people in that practice as well.
Yes, he's a very smart man. And why don't you go ahead and let the listeners know how many C2C leagues did you win this year?
Well, I did win 100%.
That's right.
Two for two. Two
100%
for two.
of very good, very good. All right, enough about Aaron. You know who I am. I don't need to talk about myself anymore. But why don't we go ahead and dive right into this 2026 recruit class? Like I said, I'm not going to be able to talk about these guys yet. I did a little bit of research on the QVs, but I'm definitely not there yet. And I'm 100% not as caught up and as knowledgeable as Aaron is about these guys. But we do have the practices for the high school All-American Bowl kicked off on Tuesday, and we have a lot of exciting recruits. Like people are very excited about some of these players, and they're all out there. I've seen it on Twitter with some of the highlights. Dante Moore throwing passes to Brandon Ennis out of Ohio State, and like I've seen all this. So like obviously people are starting to get truly excited about this kind of stuff, and rightfully so. But what do you think? Does anyone truly stand out? Is it those two players? Are there more?
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of players here that at least interest me. So I will say, from the quarterback group going to the All American Bowl, Dante Moore, yes, he is the most exciting guy, for sure. He flipped from Oregon to UCLA. He's very intriguing. John and I were just chatting actually about, some of the quarterbacks in this class may not be the most appealing from like a statistical standpoint. Some of their tools, decision making, maturity as passers really, really does show. And some of them have just been highly anticipated recruits for years. And, could they be overrated? Sure, absolutely. a lot of the tools are there, and Dante Moore is just a very well-rounded quarterback. So I'm excited to watch him. And a couple other notable names: off Austin Novosted, Oregon quarterback; Eli Holstein, he's an Alabama commit; Christopher Vizina, he's a Clemson quarterback commit. So I think that all those guys are definitely a tier or even two after Dante Moore in this class. I have them all actually pretty similarly in my ranks. I do think that Holstein, out of the two Alabama commits out of the quarterback room in the 2026 class, I think Holstein is slightly more interesting. In my opinion, I don't think he's this, again, great quarterback by any means. But I don't know. Alabama doesn't have a whole lot. And I know you have questioned some of the quarterback talent at Alabama as well, right, John?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if anyone knows who Ty Simpson actually is. And, we saw who, why is my mind blanking on the other QB right now?
Oh,
um,
Jalen Milrow.
Thank you, Jalen Milrow. We saw who he was this year, and he's just not. I'm not to say that he can't get better. I mean, obviously, there's always the chance of that. But as he was last year, he was very raw. Not anything that's going to overly excite you for at least the wide receivers. And so I don't know that it would be insane for somebody else to come in here. But like you said, you're not overly excited about Holstein, so maybe it's not going to be him. But maybe he has a shot.
Oh yeah, he has a shot, and the fact that they're bringing in two pretty highly touted guys in this class, and keep in mind this QB class is very deep. So the QB, I think Lonergan, who is the other Alabama QB, he was the QB 11 in the composite, so pretty good 4-star, and Holstein is the QB 9 in the composite. So at least notable names, and maybe similar to a Mac Jones, where they might not start day one by any means, and they might not be these sexy names like we saw last year. With the commitment of our guy Ty Simpson, who I still believe in a little bit more than these guys, and he has a year of experience, which does help. I still think that Milrow might get that shot, even if he's not this nuanced passer who's going to be a good NFL player. But down the road, 2026 class, there's some time for either Holstein or Lonergan to step up. So it should be interesting to see what all of these quarterbacks flash. I mean, Vizina at Clemson, I don't know that that Clemson quarterback spot is off limits. There will be competition there, absolutely. I like Klubnik, but he's not perfect. He's demonstrated that, especially with his most recent game. So Vizina, he has at least some interesting traits to him. Again, not a star. So, and Novosted, I didn't even talk about him to Oregon. Some people check out the Campus to Canton content that those guys put out at C2C. They are very high on him, or at least there's a select few that are pretty high on him. I actually have him. Let me check. He's the lowest of that group that I just talked about. And some
Oh
people have
wow.
him, yeah, some people have him like top 5, 6 in the quarterbacks in this class. But I do think that landing at Oregon's ultimately going to be a good thing for him. I just see him as a statue back there. He's not a rushing upside quarterback. And I think that's going to cap his ceiling for sure. But maybe he's a safe starter for a couple years at Oregon.
So you were saying that you have Dante Moore, higher than all those guys, at least a tier, if not two, above the rest of those guys. What do you think of the landing spot? And does that scare you away at all, or are you happy with the landing spot? I mean, do you think he's going to be able to show off his goods in the Pac-12?
Yeah, I do think that from a competition level, that's going to be fine. I mean, it would have been fine at Oregon, but also just fine for him to show off those skills, like you said. I think that Chip Kelly, he doesn't have necessarily a lot of big time hits at the quarterback position. Put out Marcus Mariota and then left for the NFL for a while, and then most recently doesn't have that big time recruit that he's developed or put into the NFL. And Dante Moore, he's different than what they had in DTR. DTR has always been this rushing quarterback who, I mean, he has some arm talent, but is he a polished passer? Is he a precision guy? No. So Dante Moore is going to be different. And I am concerned a little bit about the receiving core. So I would have liked Oregon a bit more as far as weapons for him to use, but as far as like competition level, Dante Moore could play quite a bit as a true freshman. And I think he may even draw some guys in from a transfer portal or a recruit standpoint, especially if he looks good right away as a freshman. So I'm not giving up on the flip there to UCLA. It's not worst case scenario, but it's also not best case.
Yeah, I see that. And, just obviously freshmen or not freshmen, I'm sorry, high school stats are not the end all be all because we have no idea like the level of competition for these players or anything like that. But I try to pick up on certain things from these guys. And me, I love my safe quarterbacks, and I don't mean like safe as in boring. I just mean like being safe with the ball, not being reckless with the ball. And he might not have been overly prolific in high school, but we see in 2021 he had 3,000 yards passing, 40 touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions. And then in 2022 he had not as much, but 2,400 passing yards, 32 touchdowns, and once again 3 interceptions. So it seems like he's pretty safe with the ball while also being able to score points and do all that kind of stuff we love. So I mean, and not that not that the comps on 24/7 are the end all be all either, but he's being comped to Dak Prescott here. Does that excite you at all? I mean, does any of that excite you, or are you just relying more on your film process there?
Yeah, it is a little bit of both for me, but I like the points that you pointed out. His touchdown to interception ratio seems good. His completion percentage is solid. He's not a guy who's driving it down the field consistently, but that's more of a product of that system versus an indictment of his arm talent. I think, he has enough arm talent out there. And I also like his build. So you brought up Dak as a potential comp, or at least one that you saw out there. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, 6'2", 210. He's bigger than Malachi Nelson, who's going to USC. Malachi is 6'3", 182. That's pretty small. That's
Jaden
like your boy
Daniels
Jaden
level.
Daniels. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. But I mean, is he going to bulk up? That's coming into college. That's his high school senior season weight. I mean, is Malachi going to come in closer to 200? I don't know, potentially. We shall see. But Dante Moore is already there, which is exciting. So I think there's a lot to like. He's firmly in my tier 1, though not. He's QB4 actually for me in this class. I could see him actually jumping Nico though, who's going to Tennessee. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not in love with the UCLA landing spot. I'm not going to move him out of the tier, but it doesn't make me want to jump him up to like QB1 or anything either.
Absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and get into the running backs here. And honestly, I've never heard of a single one of these guys. So why don't you go ahead and run us through it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple top guys that are showing up this weekend and this week. And I'm really excited. I hope that we get to see all these top guys play. Like Ruben Owens going to Texas A&M. Super explosive kid. Super explosive. 5-star running back. The one knock on him is really the size. He got passed up as the RB1 in the composite by Cedric Baxter, but he still has the 247 RB1 status. And even though he's a little bit old for the class, I mean, he's a 10.6 100-meter dash guy, and his high school production is just insane. And he has a great return background, a good receiving profile. I mean, he's difficult to comp, but he is a lot of fun. And versus Justice Haynes for Alabama, maybe a little bit less electric in some ways, but he's still a great playmaker. He's a smooth player. And when you say going to Bama, and he's 200 pounds already, I mean, Haynes, he's an attractive player. He's patient, he's elusive, he's slippery, he's productive, very, very good production in high school. I don't know, he comps like a J.K. Dobbins or even a guy who just went to Bama, Jamorian Miller. Some similarities to those guys. And yeah, Justice Haynes is fun. I rewatched him. He is actually in my tier 1 as well. So 2 tier 1 running backs in this game, Haynes and Ruben Owens. And I am a little bit scared that Richard Young, this other 5-star type, I think, yeah, he's still a 5-star, going to Bama is some competition for him at the running back position. So Bama brings in 2 very top-end running backs in this class, and that's tough. How do we decide which one's good? It's not like last year, Jamorian Miller versus Emmanuel Henderson. Well, Henderson was 185. There were rumors that maybe he wasn't even a good running back between the tackles, and then hey, it happened that he actually converted to wide receiver very early on for Bama. And that's not really going to happen with these guys if I was betting money. I think they're Haynes and Richard Young, they're going to have to battle it out at that running back spot, but still, it'll be fun to see them this weekend. And just to list off a couple other guys, there's Quentin Joyner, USC, maybe the next Lincoln Riley running back, though he also has competition in this class. Tran Webb, Florida running back, hopefully doesn't take away from our Trevor Etienne shares and production. I don't think he will. I don't think he's quite that level. And then there's also Mark Fletcher from Miami, who I know some people in the industry and the community are not as high on him. He's a bit more of a plotter, I have to say, but he's got that feature back size. So fun running backs in this group that are going to be playing.
Yeah, I love to hear it. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with the Alabama guys there. And please don't take away from our boy Trevor Etienne at Florida.
I agree. And I don't think he will. Webb has fallen a little bit in the recruit services. He was a top 6 guy in this entire class amongst the running backs in both the composite and 247 at one point, but he's dropped. Now he's RB19. And he is one of the few guys I've been watching more and more of these guys again this week because I just like to rewatch and re-go through some of the stats to review from a production standpoint. And Webb, yeah, he's been falling, but I need to rewatch him. So I think something is going on there. And yeah, I don't think Etienne's job will be lost by any means. I do have one last point, and I'm curious of your take on this. Do you think that Ruben Owens, now I understand you haven't studied him extensively, but at 5'11", 190, he's a 5-star kid, extremely versatile. Do you think he could just take over right away for Texas A&M? And I mean, with the CFF upside of a running back starter, should we be pretty darn excited for him?
I mean, I don't think it's all that crazy to think that they're trying to replace Devin Akane. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. Now, you didn't say that he has that kind of elite speed, right?
No, I mean his 100 time is great, but no, if I had to project, he'd probably be like a 4.40 guy. So I mean, I'd be shocked if he was slower than the 4.4s, but yeah,
sure.
He's
but we
good,
see we see these teams kind of bring in, like Ohio State is just bringing in all these wide receivers like over and over and over again. Like maybe you get into kind of a routine of drafting or recruiting the same guys, and maybe that's what's happening here. Is they're really just trying to replace Devin Achane, whatever the hell his name is, and I never say his name right, but I wonder if that's the case, or if it's just me comping him just because he's a smaller guy,
Right. Yeah, and this is coming in again. This is his high school weight, so it changes that height or that weight or even less after 3 years of college. So that's
Right.
that's quite a bit different. I think Ruben Owens, though he has that slender frame, I mean, he can get up to 200 plus pounds, I think, by the time he declares for the NFL draft, which we'll love if he's anything like I'm not saying he's going to be a Jahmyr Gibbs, right? But Ruben Owens is very, very well rounded, where I could see him being a great threat, both as a receiver and hopefully as a rusher who's over 200 pounds. So that's one of the guys I'm a little bit higher on than some others in the industry, it seems. But I've kind of fallen in love with Ruben Owens.
Well, I mean, just looking at, I don't know who else they brought in, if there's anybody coming over from the transfer portal. I haven't really truly paid attention to all of that. I was really busy in December, so I've been gone for most of the time. Obviously, I missed the last 2 of these pods. So, but I'm looking at it, and like Amari Daniels was the second highest rusher on the team with 200 yards rushing. Like I don't think all of a sudden he's going to take over. I guess it's not impossible, but he definitely seems to have a wide open runway there for Owens to take over. If he's at least somewhat good, and I'm sure. Based off of your film study and everything, you're thinking that it's definitely possible.
Absolutely. And 5-star status tends to lend these guys more opportunities. And that's something, if we go back to the quarterbacks as well, yeah, the 5-stars, they just seem to get a lot more opportunities than lower ranked guys as far as recruits go. So that's at least a boost security wise for them.
Yep, and then going back to the Ohio State wide receivers, we have Brandon Inniss as probably he is the wide receiver 1 in the class. No,
yeah. So he is one. I was recently talking about this wide receiver class, and I've just had to move him up. At first, I was a little bit low purely because of athleticism concerns, actually, which I think is surprising for a lot of people because people see a solid athlete, maybe not elite from a speed standpoint. But the more and more I've watched him, he doesn't need that elite speed. He might be a 4.55 guy, 4.6 guy, but that doesn't necessarily matter if he is a technician out there and he's not like this Keenan Allen or Adam Thielen, who I thought he played kind of like, except a little bit more physical, because those guys were not highly heralded recruits and high-end draft picks. Like Brennan Innes, he's going to Ohio State. He's the most polished of the guys they're bringing in, so I think he has a leg up for getting early playing time. And he's just a very, very physical wide receiver for 6 foot, 190 pounds. He's not big. He's maybe unlikely to be a full-time boundary guy, but at the same time, I mean, he plays really physical, and I think he'll be a good slot weapon with some versatility to play outside, like an Adam Thielen has, though, for example. So, again, maybe athleticism concerns, but he's in the tier 1 for me. I actually recently moved him back up into tier 1, though, because he had fallen out, to be honest with you.
Wow. I've seen Amon-Ra St. Brown comps for him. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I said Keenan Allen, Adam Thielen, Parker
Yeah.
Washington is I think kind of a lower end comp, right? A lot of people had faith that Parker Washington would become something, but yeah, some similar play styles there, I would say. So Amon-Ra St. Brown's fair.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the athleticism is concerned, people are now starting to nitpick JSN about his athleticism and how much has that mattered, at least in college. But then, even going to the NFL, I don't think it's going to truly matter.
Right, right. And maybe somebody wants to throw out the JSN comp. I mean, Julian Fleming, though, is also another guy at Ohio State who hasn't done a whole lot. Who, I mean, I recently watched much of Fleming, but there's some similarities there too. So Innes is one of those guys where I really hope he just has enough. I think from a technician standpoint, he does. But yeah, he's exciting. And then there's also some other guys in this wide receiver room playing this weekend that are going to be just very interesting. Hakeem Williams, FSU, Carnell Tate, the other Ohio State guy. There's 3 guys in this class that are high-end wide receivers going to Ohio State. My top 2 are playing in this game, Brandon Innes and then Carnell Tate. And not far behind them at all is Noah Rogers. Noah Rogers, I guess we won't go over him because we're not watching him this weekend. He's a little bit more raw than these other guys. Carnell Tate, he is a little bit raw, but playing for IMG Academy, and I can't really go off the statistical production for Carnell Tate just because their playing time is just so weird. But I do have to say, he is just, for 6'2", 185, he's very smooth and athletic. He's just a quick guy, and I think that he's developed pretty well from a route running standpoint. So I don't see a lot of weaknesses. I actually love the comp of Chris Godwin to him. I just think it fits fairly well. But anyways, he's kind of an incomplete eval, but again, 6'2", 185 going to Ohio State, 5-star guy. I mean, that's pretty attractive.
Yeah, I tend to lean towards those IMG Academy guys, not only because they put out really quality players and wide receivers, but also because it's right down the road from me.
I did not realize that. Yeah, cool. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So Carnell Tate, you didn't really talk too much about him. Do you have him ahead or behind Brandon Innes?
Yeah, so I've recently swapped it, so Brandon Innes is now ahead of him. Yep, and I think that's a more consensus take out there. Brandon Innes, I mean, he's a top 6 wide receiver across the board amongst all recruiting services that I've seen, and his production, it's kind of hard to argue with. He's played all over the field. He played some in the backfield and more exclusively as a receiver now, but he's just a very versatile player, and the production and there's so many things going his way versus Tate, a few more question marks, but Tate's upside is high, very high end. Let's say that.
I love it. So I think that's about all we're going to get into. Like I said, that we were kind of planning on maybe a little bit more discussion, but that was with Andy here. I haven't done my homework, unfortunately. So that'll probably be it for the 2026 class right now. However, if you want to hear more about it, Aaron just did a solo pod for the Devy Devotional that I am going to be editing and putting out probably tonight, if not tonight, tomorrow. It'll be out very soon, and I believe it's an hour. You might know like the exact time.
Yeah, I think it was in 50s as far as minutes go.
Okay,
And yeah,
so
you'll notice
there's a lot of good info there.
Oh yeah, well thank you. And there are some recent changes that I've made. So for example, the biggest things is Brandon Innes now moving into tier 1. So don't be outraged when you go and listen to that and hear, "Oh wow, he's way too low on him." I've realized my ways, my wrong ways. No, but also Roderick Robinson, Georgia running back. He's a guy who's been moving up for me. He was a guy who I didn't really see it based on his junior film, but just production wise, and then also his senior film, he's just dominant. I mean, 6'1", 230, and we love the guys that are at Georgia from the 2025 class, but eventually Roderick Robinson could be that next dude, assuming that he's athletic enough. So anyways, I moved him up. People on that podcast are probably going to be swearing at me when they hear how low I had him previously.
Oh no. All right. Well, yeah. So like I said, if you want to check that out, I'll be posting it on my page at Dynasty Coach A on Twitter. Obviously, Aaron will be retweeting and doing all that as well. So check that out here in the next day or two if you want to learn more about these 2026 freshmen. And then we wouldn't be able to get out of here or move on to the next segment without discussing Lucas's favorite player ever, Hendon Hooker. He finally declared for the NFL draft. I guess there was kind of question marks with the injury and the timing and everything. Maybe he would, but I don't even think he could go back. So I guess there really weren't any questions of what, because he's like 29. The question I have here for you is, do you think that Hendon Hooker with the injury, I don't think it would be a question if it wasn't for it, but with the injury, do you think Hendon Hooker is a day 2 pick, or do you think he's going to fall beyond that?
That's a really tough call. I think he's worthy of a day 2 pick because you're not going to draft a guy, let's say, day 2 in the round 2 or round 3 and expect him to be the day 1 starter. And he's going to take some time to rehab, get his legs back under him, and just learn an offense at the NFL level. I don't think he needs to be ready by week 1. Needs to be a day 1 starter. And day 2 seems like a good slot to select him if I'm thinking logically. However, I mean, with the guys that are being pushed up there, Anthony Richardson, Levis, it's like how many quarterbacks are actually going to be selected between day 1 and day 2? And that's why I'm starting to lean. Maybe he won't get selected till maybe the 4th round, similar to, I think, Sam Howell. I think that Hendon Hooker should be selected by round 3 at least. There's a lot of quarterback needy teams out there, and he could probably be at least a helpful backup, if not maybe a potential starter at some point. But I mean, he's old enough too where, I mean, injury, age, NFL teams are going to be a bit scared. So I actually lean towards not, though I think logically he probably deserves to be a late day 2 guy. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that he absolutely deserves to be a day 2 pick. I think if it wasn't for the injury, we'd be talking about him possibly being a day 1 pick, like back end or something like that. Possibly, not 100% guaranteed, but I think, for me, when I first saw the injury and thought about, oh man, he's not going to be ready for quite some time and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, all right, he's going to fall hard. But then I started thinking about it, I'm like, why the hell should he fall? Like they're taking guys like Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, like all these projects, and it's like, okay, they're going to take a year or two, and the teams know that going in. So why wouldn't you do the same thing with Hendon Hooker? Okay, it's going to take a year or two. He's not going to be out there slinging the rock on, week 1, but we know that he can throw. We know he has arm talent. We know he has all that kind of stuff. Obviously we know he's athletic and he has some of those intangibles that these teams like. And he did well in college, whether it was a system thing or not. He did a hell of a lot better than Anthony Richardson, and he has similar intangibles and whatnot. So I think he absolutely should be. Unfortunately, I don't know if he will be. I think that teams are going to be scared off, and we see these teams are just stupid. They're just so dumb, and they don't make the right choices. Very, very rarely do they make the right choices. And so I think that if I was a betting man, I would be betting that he's not going to be a day 2 pick.
Very fair. Yeah, absolutely.
So unfortunately, Lucas, when you're listening back to this, I think, I mean, honestly, he's pretty realistic. So I don't think he's going to be like hurt by our decision here. He'll probably understand it, but we couldn't give him any good news here. All right, so we're going to take a quick little break, and then when we get back, we're going to be talking about some transfer portal madness because it keeps crazy shit keeps happening. We'll be right back.
Keishan Butte pulled the old switcheroo and decided that he is now, in fact, declaring for the NFL draft. My initial reaction to his first decision to stay in school for another year was indifferent, but ultimately I felt that it was the better of the two decisions. My feelings have not changed. I still think staying another year could have been beneficial. Another offseason of rehab on his leg injury and another full year to get acclimated to that new offense may have resulted in a bounce back year and eventually getting his draft stock back into the first round. As it stands right now, he most likely goes on day 2, but that's assuming his medicals pass with NFL team doctors. I'm not convinced he's 100% healthy. He played in every game this season, and he was outplayed by Malik Neighbors. His freshman season is outstanding. His sophomore year was on pace to be huge prior to that injury. And now I feel like we're left with some question marks. So we'll have to see what happens as he goes through the draft process.
Alrighty, and we're back. So, Andy just laid it out for us. So you're starting with the transfer portal madness. What do you think of the whole Keishan Butte thing? First of all, he had mentioned that he doesn't think that he's 100% healthy. Do you think that that's the case? Do you think it was an Achilles? Because he obviously had a severe drop off from from his play, previously, and it's kind of difficult to explain it away.
Yeah, I mean, between the ankle issue and then, crazy sex parties with staff and other teammates, I guess I get it, but at least there's some rumors out there. Let's just say that. You can check them out, determine their legitimacy yourself, I guess. But yeah, Boutte, he just has so much natural talent to him. And we actually started seeing at the end of the year, he was figuring that back out, and he was breaking off some of the big plays that we were just waiting to see all year long. So the transition to a new coaching staff, new system might have taken a bit longer than we should have or than we were expecting. Plus the idea of him just getting healthy. And there's reasons to explain that away, I guess. Ultimately, it's important that he's now healthier and healthier. Are there going to be some question marks, like even now, maybe off the field, even a little bit? Sure. I think he's probably more of a round 2 type of player at this point, but still very, very valuable for NFL teams and for fantasy teams. He's a stud. I still really like him. I wonder if he'll be going, late first in rookie drafts?
Yeah, I think too many people fell in love with him freshman year, sophomore year for him to fall out of the first round in rookie drafts. That being said, I do think that he will be a second round pick, possibly even a third round pick. I would probably bet second, but in the NFL draft, because I think that's the grade he got. I think that's why he decided to stay in school. And then everything happened. Obviously it's all rumors and speculation at this point, but it makes a lot of sense. Dude was going back to school, and then now it seems like he's kicked out. And so he's like, all right, well, now I have to declare, or I have to transfer and all that. And he's like, it's probably just easier to declare, be a second round pick, get a bigger contract at some point, like do all that kind of stuff. He'll still be fine. It's really tough for me as an analytical person who stares at the numbers all day, every day, to just go, okay, he played this entire season, and I'm just going to throw it away and be like, nope, he's the freshman and sophomore guy. Like, I can't do it. It's just not my style. You know that. And it's even more difficult when he gets beat out by a player on his team. Now, Andy kind of made it seem like, oh, it's Malik Neighbors, like he sucks. I think Malik Neighbors is pretty good. Now, I'm not saying Malik Neighbors is a stud. He's not a Jason or a Jordan Addison or anything like that. He's not to that level, but I do think he's a quality player. But he substantially beat out Keishon Butte on his own team, all that. And so you can say it's the injury and all that. It's just so difficult for me to just completely take that out of my mind.
Yeah, no, I get that. And sometimes these guys are a bit of a projection, just taking a chance that they can get back to their previous levels. But the fact that he showed that so early in college also is another thing hard for me to, I guess, just set aside or say, well, now he's this player. He can't get back to that same level.
But I've mentioned it before on our pod, but he was doing that with Terrace Marshall, and Terrace Marshall looked like a stud at the same time. And now we know who Terrace Marshall is. And I'm not saying just because one player is bad that the other one has to be and all that kind of stuff. I'm just saying that at the time it was like, oh, look how good he is because he's just as good as Terrace Marshall. But now we know Terrace Marshall sucks.
Yeah, I mean that was Terrace Marshall's third or fourth season versus Butte's freshman, but yes, your point is taken. And I'll just kind of reference our rookie mock that we did a couple weeks ago on the Devy Devotional podcast. You and I selected at 109 Kendre Miller, 110 Quentin Johnston, 111 Sean Tucker, and 112 Zach Charbonnet. And I could realistically see people bumping Butte up and maybe one of those guys down into the early second. I don't know if I'm quite ready for that yet, but I'm willing to have that conversation for sure.
Yeah, and obviously it's going to be draft capital and landing spot and everything else that goes along with it that's going to play into it. I really don't mind him at the end of the first. I don't know that I would necessarily take him there, but I don't mind it. It's not one of those things where I go, oh, you guys are absolutely insane for doing it. I get it, and he's definitely flashed. He's shown a lot of quality play in the past, but something's just not right. I don't know what it is. Something's just not adding up. Hopefully he goes out and just completely dominates the combine, which people kind of expect him to, I guess, at this point. At least in the past, people expected him to be this dominant athletic player. Whether he's still that player or not, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But before we get into the rest of the transfer portal madness, let me just remind you that this is the Full Tilt Dynasty and Devy podcast. We are brought to you by the Fantasy Points Media Group. And right now we have a special at the Fantasy Points Media Group where you can get 30% off of the annual subscription by taking advantage of their early bird special, if I could speak, on the website. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to put in Full Tilt. All you have to do is go to their website, click on the early bird special, go ahead and sign up, and you will save 30% off the full year. So take advantage of that while you still can. I honestly do not know how long that is going for. I am just relaying some information, so take advantage of it as quickly as possible. But I have some players here listed out from Andy, and I'm supposed to ask you, what player are you or landing spot are you most excited about here? We have a couple different ones. We have Sam Hartman at Notre Dame, and then Devin Leary at Kentucky. Do you have a preference there?
Pass.
All right, pass. All right, Dominic Lovett at Georgia or Dorian Singer at USC?
Dorian Singer, USC. I think that's a fun landing spot. He was very productive this last year. A lot of good metrics to back that, and I mean it wasn't bad competition either. So give me the guy from Arizona. Not that I hate Lovett. Lovett was doing that in the same competition as Luther Burden. Very talented 5-star wide receiver. So, I mean, Lovett doing that at Missouri was fun. Do I think that Georgia's going to pepper any wide receiver with enough targets to be truly as fun as maybe a guy at USC? Probably not. So, Singer's my answer.
I think Singer's the easy answer. I like both players a lot. I like Singer a little bit more. Even with like taking the landing spot and all that kind of stuff out of it, just as a player, I like him a little bit more. But the landing spot, being tied to Caleb Williams, and then who was the other QB that we were talking about before? That's going there
to USC.
Yeah,
Malachi Nelson.
Yeah. So, and I mean, people are really excited about him. So hopefully people are assuming at least that it's going to continue on after Caleb Williams is gone. I think we know what Georgia is as an offense. I guess it's been better this year. Things have been good, but it's not the USC offense. It's not that going to be that prolific thing. So I think that it's pretty easy to say that Dorian Singer is a huge winner here. But I'm interested to see what Dominic Lovett can do. Do we even know who the Georgia quarterback's going to be? Like, it can't possibly be Bennett again, right?
No, I don't anticipate it to be Bennett. I mean, I think Gunnar Stockton is a fun option in the 2025 class. He was a guy that I think we both kind of liked him. I mean, he was productive
Yeah.
in high school, and he's a little undersized. I mean, Bennett's also been undersized, but at 6'1", I don't know what Stockton's up to. He was 210 coming out. He's a good scrambler. He can extend plays, and maybe they inject some life into that passing offense. But still, I mean, it's just not really, it's not apples to apples. You know, Georgia's going to focus on that running game with the stud running backs that they have there.
Absolutely. And the last one we have here is Dominic Richardson at Baylor or Ray Davis at Kentucky.
Gonna have to go Raymond Davis, Kentucky. Yeah, Dominic Richardson, he's just been a little bit too much of a plotter, just not efficient ever. And unless he gets a million goal line opportunities, I'm not so sure about him. And our guy, Tay McWilliams, he's got to come back, right? He's got to prove that this lost season won't stop him from assuming that full potential at Baylor.
Do we even know exactly what happened? Because I remember I was watching that game. He got a concussion. He got a pretty nasty concussion. Maybe that's what it was. But I mean, he never came back. Like, he missed the rest of the season, as far as I know, or at least most of the season. So I don't know. I really don't know what the hell happened to him.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I think it's kind of a long shot at this point that maybe he comes back and just seizes that role, but it's possible. We know he's talented. So give me the guy who I think gets more of that feature back role, even though Ray Davis at Kentucky, and he's been good in the past, not great, but I again think that we saw Chris Rodriguez be pretty good at Kentucky and a CFF threat for us. And I think Davis can be somewhat similar to that.
I agree. I honestly don't have a lot to add with the two players there. I think that, like you said, the system and everything, we should probably see him be able to take advantage of it. And I think that Raymond Davis there is the right pick. And I'm hoping, and we're both hoping, that Ted McWilliams can do something at Baylor. So, well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see there. All right, so we're going to take a very quick little break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the college football championship.
It can absolutely crush you. And let me tell you, there's almost nothing worse than being like damn near undefeated, losing one game all year, and you go out, or losing two games, you miss the bye, and you lose in your first playoff game to a team that barely made it in.
Yeah. I mean,
it's the worst feeling in the world.
We talk all the time about the any given Sunday of the aspect of the NFL right now. When you play fantasy, that any given Sunday is built into a lot of times when you're playing, against another player. That any given Sunday is built into 14 games across an entire week. So the level of complexity that's added in on, the worst team in the league could have an amazing game randomly. Mm-hmm. It just happens sometimes.
All right, so obviously we're kind of at the end of the dynasty season here, but we're in a bunch of leagues together and everything. Like, you've obviously been there. I had somebody tell me about a month ago or so that it's not that important to get the bye. It doesn't really matter if your team's just that good. You're just gonna do it. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think the bye is super important, and I can use my own, I guess, examples this year. It's like I was in the playoffs in the majority of my leagues, and the byes, I mean, they did help because obviously you move on around, right? But I didn't have very good luck that 1 week, and that's sometimes what it is in the playoffs. You just, the right luck, maybe you trade for a player who really injects some life into your lineup, or maybe it's not even luck. It's just like your team was overperforming all year, and then you just don't have it for 1 week. So I think that extra week that you can gain safety-wise through a bye is so important. And I'm not saying that plenty of people win the championship without having that bye, but it just adds another level of security of getting you to that championship game and probably more money. You might earn your money back at least. Let's say you win the third place game then if you don't make it to the championship. The bye helps you along. So I got to say, it is important. It's not the end all be all, but yeah, I really like having a bye if I can.
Absolutely. All right, before we dive into the college football championship here, why don't we go ahead and talk a little bit about underdog fantasy? You guys have heard me talk about them before, but as the dynasty season, the redraft seasons are ending, underdog fantasy is still there. You can draft playoff leagues, teams. My buddy Omega, he's on there like every day drafting a new team, and he's pretty excited about it. He's also doing very well because he won quite a bit of money via underdog this year. So he is a huge fan, and I highly recommend that you take advantage of our promo code Full Tilt on Underdog. Go ahead and get $100 promo match if you haven't already. Get a free $100 to use on Underdog and go win all that cash. But why don't we go ahead and dive into the very exciting college football playoff championship here? Like, the semifinals there this past week were very exciting. A lot of fun, a lot of back and forth, a lot of craziness, especially in that Michigan game. There's some wild plays, wild calls, all that kind of stuff. I guess before we get into the actual championship game, do you think the right teams made it?
I don't know if this is how I drew it up necessarily. I won't say right or wrong because I don't know about that. Do I think that TCU is the better team? Yeah, no, but they were fun and they went on a run there, and that's just amazing to see. We love that in college football. And Georgia, I mean, they came back. Ohio State kind of had that and just slipped through their fingers. And do I think that Georgia's better as an all-around team? Yes. So the best team is probably there in Georgia, and then the fun team, who I think probably doesn't beat Georgia, but it would be so fun to see if they did. TCU being there is cool as well. So if I'm going to make a prediction on this game, I have Georgia. I'll say 17 points that they're going to win by. I know that's a decent mark for sure, but their defense is just so dominant. And now Kendra Miller, he's questionable for the game. I heard the coach's comments. They don't sound particularly optimistic, and I understand that they're trying to just not give anything away for the game, but I don't know. It's not looking good for Kendra Miller. He might try to go out there and play, but it could be like the Blake Corum deal a couple weeks ago when he tried and he played like one drive and his knee just wouldn't tolerate it.
Yeah, it really sucks. But we obviously want him to stay healthy. We both are big Kendra fans, and we want him to enter the NFL draft and be able to do everything at the combine and all that kind of good stuff. Yeah, I'm with you. I guess I wish that Kendra was healthy so that there weren't any excuses or anything like that. But I don't think that they're going to get those big broken plays with Quentin Johnston like they did, with this last one, whether you want to call it a broken play or not. I mean, it was essentially like zero coverage. All he had to do was break one tackle, and it wasn't even a good tackle, and then he was just gone. I mean, like, I guess technically it's not a broken play, but I'm watching and I'm like, really? Like that's just kind of crazy. That's a little too easy,
Right. People want to tout the speed from that run, and I mean, he wasn't slow on the run. I will give them that, but that also doesn't prove that he's this like elite speedster either. So, I mean, is he going to break plays like that? Probably not. Like you said, he will be an impact player in this game, and this could be huge for his draft capital, his NFL draft stock. I'm super excited to see him match up against good competition there on the defense. So Quentin Johnston will be a guy that I'll have my eyes on very, very often during this game.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is a great opportunity to look at him against like probably future NFL talent. And so it's a really good way to see how he's going to look, because he's been so hit or miss. It just like he's had these huge games and then he just completely disappears. And, we have people talking about him possibly being the wide receiver one in the class. And, I don't think either one of us are there, but, I enjoy being able to watch him more and see, what people fall in love with and that kind of thing.
Right, yeah, if he can come on strong, that's huge for his draft stock. Are there other players in this game that particularly catch your eye that you're really looking forward to seeing?
I mean, a lot of people are really high on Kenny McIntosh as well, and I haven't quite been there. Not to say that I don't like him. I just don't know if he's a like a workhorse running back. I don't think he has that in his game. And so we saw some explosive plays in that Michigan game, or no, I'm sorry, not in the Michigan game, in the Ohio State game. Like we saw some explosive plays from him, but I don't think there were very many of them. But he had like that one big 52-yarder, and then I think he might have had a couple other ones. I think he is that type of player where he can score you points. He could be something that's viable in the NFL, but it also could be one of those players that's a better NFL player than a fantasy player when it's all said and done. And that's just kind of how I've always felt about him. But maybe by watching him, maybe he'll go out, put a bunch of points up on TCU and change my mind.
Yeah, and one of the main things he needs to do is change the NFL's mind as well. If there are some teams that are interested but a little bit skeptical, we know that this is the best stage to really break out and secure that draft capital. You see it year after year with guys. Josh Jacobs, even years ago, it's like he was good production wise. There wasn't as much to go off of as far as could he be a workhorse type of guy, but he proved that he was at least versatile and explosive enough, and then he secured first round draft capital not long after that. So all sorts of he's a capable receiver. I mean, like you said, maybe not a workhorse stud, but capable at least of playing all three downs if he needs to, or if an NFL team entrusts him in that role for at least a little while.
Yeah, and then the last guy is Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell. I don't think we kind of both liked him, but he didn't quite have the season that maybe we wanted him to or expected him to. But he's kind of been showing out a little bit lately. Is he back on your radar, or did he never fall off?
This may be a last gasp, I guess, for AD Mitchell. Like, as far as we know that Georgia's bringing in some talent this next year. We already talked about the transfer portal move of getting Dominic Lovett, and Lovett probably will take over as the number one unless AD Mitchell just really commands some more targets here and breaks out in the big spotlight. He was injured much of the year, so we have to take that into consideration, but he hasn't really taken that next step forward. I'm not sure that at this point he's a high-end CFF or just Devy asset, to be honest. He doesn't have a lot of value, but he's one of the guys I guess I'll be watching for Georgia outside of that running back room that's always so talented.
Yeah, I mean, he only played 5 games. I don't even know how many of those were healthy games or anything like that. But he did. I mean, I guess I thought he did more. He only had 43 yards and on 3 receptions. He scored a touchdown this past week. So maybe that's what's sticking out of my head is that he scored. But I thought he did a little bit more than 43 yards here. Yeah, actually, it's really like his first game of the year that he did anything, and then the last game of the year. Everything else is really kind of just gone. So yeah, okay. So we don't really need to talk about AD Mitchell anymore. But I think that's really it for me as far as like anyone that I'm truly trying to pay attention to. I guess we can go to the TCU side and do you think that Max Duggan can possibly become a first round pick? If they actually win, if they win this game, because I guess obviously they're 17-point underdogs here, so it would be quite the game for them to go ahead and win this matchup.
Pass.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like you said, this is the national spotlight. This is where people can change the NFL's mind, change rookie drafters' minds, and all that kind of stuff as well. So I don't think it's impossible. But while I don't think it's impossible, I know I will not be drafting him in the first round of a rookie draft, and I highly doubt the NFL is going to be drafting him in the first round either.
Right. He's just not a high-end passer, and as much as I love the mobility that he brings on the ground, that's fun. I don't know. The NFL doesn't draft to be fun all the time, unless you have these really crazy traits that people seem to fall in love with. But Max Duggan, he's been around for a while. We kind of know what he is. He's taken a step forward in a lot of ways, much better as far as just throwing touchdowns this year. But other than that, like his completion percentage and there's some other statistics that he didn't really take a large step forward with this year that we probably wanted to see as a more refined passer. So he takes the game into his own hands with the legs, and we love to see it, but I just don't think there's going to be quite enough, even if they win this game. I mean, he'll be a legend at TCO for sure, but not a first-round pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, one thing that's nice about having the model is, anytime we talk about a guy, I can look him up, find his rank, really quickly, see where I have him ranked around, and not to knock film grinders and that kind of thing, but you might not be able to do quite the same thing. It might not be as easy to rank everyone, that way, because there's a lot more subjectiveness and things like that to it. Whereas this is, I guess, as objective as you could possibly be. And the point of the story is that Max Duggan is behind Stetson Bennett, Will Levis, all those guys that that would be. The only guy he's above is Anthony Richardson, but my hatred for Anthony Richardson, so that shows you all that.
Love it.
All right, well, that was pretty much all we had for this takeover of the Full Tilt Devy podcast by the Devy Devotional tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, please go check out Aaron's solo pod that's going to be coming out in the next day or two, and make sure you like and subscribe and do all that kind of good stuff to the Devy Devotional, so you can check us out and listen to more of what we have to say. But Aaron, you were, I believe, maybe the first guest ever on the Full Tilt Devy podcast. I could be wrong about that. I'll have to fact check that with the higher ups, but I don't remember there being a guest. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get out of here, where people can find you, what else you have planned for the off season, whether it be solo pods or with me or anything else, starting up any leagues, anything like that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. Just an honor to be on the Full Tilt Devy podcast with you, and I'm sad things didn't work out, but I'd love to be a guest again if we're going to talk about some 2026 or other classes in particular. So for anybody who wants to go out and follow me, I'm on Twitter at Aaron Wilcox 86. Not that I necessarily put out a lot of content, but I like to chime in about prospect evaluations, and I'm always available to, if you have questions, you want to reach out. So happy to do that, talk about any Devy, C2C, etc. So that's where you can find me. As far as anything special planned, we're going to continue putting out some content, like you said, at the Devy Devotional Podcast. So check that out. That's the main things right now. But I always like to do some pretty extensive Devy rankings, or I kind of combine it. It's more of a C2C rank that I like to do, just because it's my favorite league to play in. So maybe I will be able to jump into a new startup this year. It'd be fun to have a combined NFL. So a campus and Canton side, so all the college players drafted in the same pool as the NFL players. Like, that would be so fun, and it's out there. It's just a matter of just finding the right league,
Degenerates.
the right opportunity. Oh yeah, absolutely. So anyways, that is one thing I'm kind of looking forward to looking into.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Aaron, for jumping on and saving my butt, because I did not know how to talk about these freshmen, and hopefully I can catch up here pretty shortly. I did a pretty good job last year in the off season of catching up and figuring out who the right prospects were. It wasn't perfect. No one is ever going to be perfect with these recruits, but I did a pretty good job. I remember being really high on this one player. I don't know if you heard of him, Drake May. I think he's a pretty good QB now. So
Yeah, he's behind a guy at USC, but yeah, for sure.
I guess depending on who you're talking to. All right, well, that's enough of us. We're right at the hour mark, so we're actually doing pretty well on time and everything. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Make sure you check everything out from Aaron at Aaron Wilcox 86. Make sure you listen to Andy's recap from this past week. It's only 5 minutes long. He was talking about some transfer portal, college football playoffs, all that kind of good stuff, just keeping you informed. It's really quick, really informative. So check that out every week. And that's on this podcast network. That's on YouTube, all that kind of good stuff. So make sure you're subscribed and all that kind of check the bell, do whatever the hell you got to do. But make sure you listen and follow Andy. Make sure you follow and listen to Aaron. And obviously, you got to follow your boy, Dynasty Coach A. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. And this time I'm going to go ahead and remember to hit the outro. See you guys.